Somebody help. There's a girl in the water. The scream tore through the quiet night at the Texas lake. Nathaniel Hayes looked up from his phone, his heart jumping. He'd only stopped by the water to clear his head after a long day of meetings. His tie was loose, his jacket already off. But the panic in that voice made him run. He pushed through a small crowd gathering near the dock and his blood went cold. In the dark water, a little black girl was fighting for her life. Her small arms were flailing, her head going under, then up, then under again. She was maybe 7 years old. And she was drowning. She just fell in, someone shouted. She can't swim. Nathaniel saw something that made his stomach turn. Her wrists, they had marks on them. Red marks. Like she'd been tied up. Nobody else was moving. They were all just standing there, watching. Nathaniel didn't think. He kicked off his shoes and dove straight into the lake. The cold water hit him like a punch, but he pushed through it. His arms cut through the water hard and fast. The girl went under again. He reached her just as she stopped moving. He grabbed her around the waist, pulled her up, and kicked hard toward the shore. When they broke the surface, she gasped, a horrible, choking sound. Nathaniel kept her head above water, his arm locked around her. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you. You're safe now." But what this little girl would say to him in the hospital would change his entire life. And the truth behind why she was drowning? It would lead him down a dark path of betrayal, lies, and revenge. Hey everyone, welcome back to Top Story. If you're new here, welcome to the family. And to my amazing subscribers, thank you for being here. You all mean the world to me. Before we jump into this story, I want to say a quick prayer for you. Father God, I lift up everyone watching this video right now. Bless them and their families. Protect them from harm. Give them strength when they're weak and hope when they're tired. Open doors for them that no one can close. Let your favor follow them everywhere they go. In Jesus' name, amen. Alright, now if this story moves you today, please hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe if you haven't already. You don't want to miss what happens next. Trust me. Let's get into it. The lake had been quiet all evening. Too quiet. Nathaniel Hayes wasn't supposed to be in Texas. He was supposed to be back in New York, sitting in his corner office on the 40th floor, reviewing contracts and closing deals. That's what billionaires did. That's what he was good at. But his company had just bought a piece of land near this lake, and he wanted to see it for himself. So he drove out alone. No assistant. No security. Just him and the open road. He parked near the water and walked along the shore. The moon was bright. The air was warm. It should have been peaceful. But then he heard it. Somebody help. There's a girl in the water. His head snapped up. A woman was screaming, pointing toward the dock. Other people were running toward the edge, but nobody was jumping in. Nathaniel's feet moved before his brain caught up. He sprinted toward the crowd, shoving past people until he could see what they were looking at. And his heart stopped. A little girl was in the water. She was small, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Her arms were thrashing wildly, her head dipping under the surface again and again. She was trying to scream, but every time she opened her mouth, water rushed in. "She can't swim," someone yelled. Nathaniel's eyes locked on her wrists. Even from the shore, he could see them. Red marks. Deep ones. Like she'd been tied up. His stomach twisted. "Why isn't anyone helping her?" he shouted. Nobody answered. They just stood there, frozen. Nathaniel didn't wait. He ripped off his jacket, kicked off his shoes, and dove in. The cold water slammed into him, stealing his breath. But he didn't stop. He swam hard, his arms cutting through the water like knives. The girl went under again. He could see her sinking, her little body going limp. No, he growled, pushing himself faster. He reached her just in time. His hand grabbed her waist and pulled her up. She wasn't moving. Her eyes were closed. Her lips were blue. Nathaniel locked his arm around her and kicked toward the shore with everything he had. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Please, stay with me." When they reached the shore, he laid her down gently on the grass. Her chest wasn't moving. Panic shot through him. He pressed his hands to her chest and pushed. Once. Twice. 3 times. "Come on," he said through gritted teeth. "Come on, breathe." He pushed again. Harder this time. Suddenly, water came pouring out of her mouth. She coughed violently, her whole body jerking as she gasped for air. Her eyes flew open, wide and terrified. Nathaniel's hands were shaking. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. "You're okay," he said, his voice breaking. "You're okay now." But even as he said it, he couldn't stop staring at her wrists. At the deep red marks that ran all the way around them. Someone had tied this little girl up. And then they'd thrown her in the water to die. The ambulance came fast. Sirens screaming. Lights flashing red and blue across the water. The paramedics rushed over and wrapped the little girl in a silver blanket. She was shaking hard, her teeth chattering, her eyes still wide with fear. "Sir, did you see what happened?" one of the paramedics asked Nathaniel. "She was drowning," Nathaniel said, his voice tight. "Nobody was helping her. I pulled her out." "You saved her life," the paramedic said, nodding. "We're taking her to County General. You should come with us. Police will want a statement." Nathaniel looked down at the girl. She was staring at him. Not blinking. Just staring. "I'll follow you there," he said. But as the paramedics lifted her onto the stretcher, her small hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. "Don't leave me," she whispered. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. "I won't," he said. "I promise." At the hospital, they put her in a small room with white walls and beeping machines. Nathaniel sat in the chair beside her bed, still soaking wet, his shirt clinging to his chest. The doctors came in and out. They checked her lungs. Her heart. Her wrists. "She's stable," one of them said. "But those marks on her wrists, someone tied her up. We've already called the police." Nathaniel nodded, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. She was so small. So fragile. How could anyone do this to a child? Hours passed. The room got quiet. The girl's eyes started to close. But then, just before she fell asleep, she turned her head and looked at him. "Daddy," she whispered. Nathaniel's whole body went stiff. The room started spinning. That word. That one word. He hadn't been called that in 8 years. Not since college. Not since the night his father sat him down and told him the problem was handled. Not since Grace disappeared and never came back. But this little girl, this stranger, she looked at him with those big, tired eyes and called him Daddy. And Nathaniel's hands started shaking. Because deep down, in a place he'd buried years ago, he knew. He knew. Nathaniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in that hospital chair, staring at the girl as she slept. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Peacefully. Like she hadn't almost died just hours ago. But his mind was racing. Daddy. Why would she call him that? She didn't know him. He didn't know her. It didn't make sense. Unless. No. He shook his head. It wasn't possible. His father had promised him. The baby was gone. Grace had taken care of it. That's what his father said. That's what he'd been told. But what if his father lied? The next morning, the doctor said she was doing better. Her lungs were clear. Her vitals were strong. But she still wasn't talking much. She's traumatized, one of the nurses said. Give her time. Nathaniel stayed anyway. He couldn't leave. Something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. On the third day, the nurse brought her crayons and paper. Maybe drawing will help her open up, she said. The girl took the crayons slowly. She stared at the blank paper for a long time. Then, she started drawing. Nathaniel watched from the corner of the room, pretending to check his phone. But his eyes kept drifting back to her. She drew 2 stick figures. One tall. One small. When she was done, she held it up and looked at him. Nathaniel walked over slowly. His heart was pounding. He took the paper from her hands. And his blood went cold. The tall stick figure had a label written in shaky letters, Daddy. The small one said, Me. But that wasn't what made his hands start shaking. It was the watch. The tall stick figure had a watch on its wrist. A square watch. With a thick band. Exactly like his. Nathaniel's throat closed up. He looked down at his wrist. At the custom-made watch his father had given him when he graduated college. The one he wore every single day. There was no way she could have guessed that. No way. Unless she'd seen it before. Unless she knew him. Where did you see this? Nathaniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. The girl looked up at him with those big, sad eyes. You used to hold me, she said quietly. When I was little. And Nathaniel's world came crashing down. Nathaniel stumbled out of the hospital room. His legs felt weak. His chest was tight. He leaned against the wall in the hallway, pressing his palms against his eyes. This can't be real. But the watch. The way she looked at him. The word, Daddy. It was all too much. His mind dragged him back. Back to a time he'd spent years trying to forget. 8 years ago. Nathaniel was 22. Just a college kid with big dreams and a trust fund he hadn't touched yet. He was studying business at Stanford, working late nights, partying on weekends. That's when he met Grace. She was beautiful. Smart. Funny. But she wasn't from his world. She worked 2 jobs to pay for school. She didn't have a trust fund or a famous last name. And Nathaniel fell for her anyway. They spent every night together. Talking. Laughing. Planning a future that felt so close he could taste it. But then Grace got pregnant. Nathaniel remembered the day she told him. She was scared. He was terrified. But he held her hand and said, We'll figure it out. Together. He meant it. But his father had other plans. Richard Hayes didn't ask questions. He didn't listen to excuses. He just acted. He showed up at Nathaniel's apartment one night with a briefcase full of cash and a look that could cut steel. You're not throwing your life away for some girl, his father said. I've already handled it. What do you mean you handled it? Nathaniel asked, his voice rising. She'll take the money and disappear. The baby will be gone. And you'll finish school like nothing happened. You can't do that. Nathaniel shouted. That's my child. His father leaned in close, his voice cold and sharp. You don't have a child. You have a future. And I'm not letting you destroy it. Nathaniel tried to find Grace after that. He called her. Texted her. Went to her apartment. But she was gone. Her roommate said she'd moved. No forwarding address. No phone number. And his father told him it was done. The pregnancy was taken care of. Nathaniel believed him. He had no choice. So he buried it. Locked it away. And moved on with his life. But now, standing in this hospital hallway, staring at a little girl who looked just like Grace, he realized his father had lied. The baby wasn't gone. She was right here. And someone had tried to kill her. Nathaniel left the hospital that night around 10 p.m. His head was spinning. His chest felt heavy. He needed answers. He needed to know the truth. But first, he needed air. He walked through the parking lot slowly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. The night was cool. Quiet. The kind of quiet that should have felt peaceful. But it didn't. As he reached his car, he saw him. A man. Tall. Wearing a dark coat. Leaning against the driver's side door like he'd been waiting. Nathaniel stopped. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice tight. The man smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was cold. Sharp. "You've been spending a lot of time with that girl," the man said. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "Who are you?" The man pushed off the car and took a step closer. "Someone who's giving you advice," he said. "Walk away. She's not your problem." "She almost drowned," Nathaniel shot back. "I'm not walking away from a child who needs help." The man's smile faded. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping. "That girl? She's not supposed to be found. And the people who want her gone. They don't like loose ends." Nathaniel's blood went cold. "Are you threatening me?" The man reached into his coat pocket. Nathaniel's muscles tensed, ready to fight. But the man didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a card. Plain. White. No name. Just a phone number. "I'm warning you," the man said, holding out the card. "If you keep digging, you'll regret it." Nathaniel didn't take the card. The man dropped it on the hood of the car and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Nathaniel stood there, his fists clenched, his heart pounding. Someone wanted that little girl dead. And now they knew he was in the way. He picked up the card and stared at the number. Then he crushed it in his hand. "Let them come," he whispered. Nathaniel didn't sleep that night either. He sat in his hotel room, staring at the crushed card on the table. His mind kept replaying the stranger's words. She's not supposed to be found. What did that mean? Who wanted her gone? And why? But the bigger question, the one that made his stomach twist, was the one he'd been avoiding. Is she mine? The next morning, Nathaniel made a decision. He called his lawyer first. Then his private investigator. Within 2 hours, he had a DNA testing kit delivered to the hospital. He walked into the girl's room quietly. She was awake, sitting up in bed, coloring another picture. When she saw him, her face lit up. "You came back," she said softly. "I told you I would," Nathaniel said, sitting down beside her. She smiled. It was small. Fragile. But real. Nathaniel's chest tightened. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently. "I need to do something, okay? It won't hurt. I promise." She looked at him with curious eyes. "What is it?" "I just need to take a little sample from your cheek," he said, pulling out the swab. "Like this." He opened his mouth and showed her. She giggled. "That's silly," she said. "I know," Nathaniel said, smiling. "But it's important. Can you open your mouth for me?" She nodded and opened wide. Nathaniel gently swabbed the inside of her cheek. It took 5 seconds. She didn't even flinch. "All done," he said. "That's it?" she asked. "That's it." She went back to coloring, humming a little tune. But Nathaniel's hands were shaking as he sealed the swab and put it in his pocket. 3 days later, the results came. Nathaniel sat in his lawyer's office, staring at the envelope on the desk. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. "Do you want me to open it?" his lawyer asked. Nathaniel shook his head. He reached out slowly and picked up the envelope. His hands were trembling. He tore it open. Pulled out the paper. And read the words that would change everything. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. The paper slipped from his fingers and floated to the floor. She was his daughter. His little girl. The one he thought was gone. And someone had tied her up and thrown her in a lake to die. Nathaniel's vision blurred. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. "Find out who did this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. His lawyer nodded. "Already on it." Nathaniel couldn't stay away from the hospital after that. He visited every day. Brought her toys. Books. Anything to make her smile. But at night, when the lights were dim and the hallways were quiet, she would talk. And what she said broke him. It was late. Almost midnight. The nurses had just finished their rounds. Nathaniel sat in a chair beside her bed, watching her sleep. But then her eyes opened. Slowly. Like she'd been fighting a nightmare. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Do you want to talk about it?" She was quiet for a long time. Then, she sat up and pulled her knees to her chest. "They tied me," she whispered. Nathaniel's heart stopped. "Who tied you, sweetheart?" "The men," she said, her voice so small he could barely hear it. "They came at night. Grabbed me from my bed. Put tape on my mouth so I couldn't scream." Nathaniel's jaw clenched. His fists balled up tight. "Where did they take you?" "To the lake," she said. Her eyes filled with tears. "They tied my hands with rope. It hurt so bad. I cried, but they didn't care." A tear rolled down her cheek. Nathaniel wanted to reach out. To hold her. But he stayed still, letting her speak. "They said nobody would find me," she continued. "They said I was a mistake. That I shouldn't exist." Her voice cracked. "Then they pushed me in the water." Nathaniel's vision went red. His breathing got heavy. His whole body shook with rage. "Do you remember what they looked like?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. She nodded. One was tall. Had a scar on his face. The other one, he smelled like smoke. And he kept saying, "The boss wants this done clean." Nathaniel leaned forward. "The boss? Did they say a name?" She thought hard. Then she nodded again. "They said, Briggs will pay us when it's done." Nathaniel's blood turned to ice. Briggs. Walter Briggs. His father's old friend. The politician who'd been at every family dinner. Every business deal. Every secret meeting. Nathaniel stood up slowly, his hands shaking. "Get some rest, sweetheart," he said softly. "I'll be right outside." She nodded and lay back down. But Nathaniel didn't go outside. He went to the hallway. Pulled out his phone. And made a call. "I need everything you can find on Walter Briggs," he said. "And I need it tonight." Nathaniel didn't go back to his hotel that night. He drove straight to his private investigator's office. It was 2 a.m., but he didn't care. He'd paid the man enough to be available anytime. Marcus Chen was already waiting for him. Files spread across his desk. Coffee brewing in the corner. "You look like hell," Marcus said. "I feel worse," Nathaniel replied. "Tell me you found something." Marcus nodded and slid a thick folder across the desk. Walter Briggs. 63 years old. State senator. Clean record on paper. But dig a little deeper. He opened the folder. Inside were photos. Bank statements. Old emails. He's dirty, Marcus continued. Real dirty. Money laundering. Blackmail. He's been covering his tracks for decades. Nathaniel flipped through the pages, his jaw tight. What's his connection to my father? Marcus pulled out another file. They go way back. College roommates. Business partners in the early days. Your father helped him get elected. Briggs helped your father bury scandals. Nathaniel's stomach twisted. What kind of scandals? Marcus hesitated. The kind that involve making problems disappear, he said carefully. Women. Pregnancies. Anything that could hurt the Hayes name. Nathaniel's fists slammed against the desk. Grace, he said through gritted teeth. He made Grace disappear. Marcus nodded slowly. I found records. 8 years ago, a woman named Grace Mitchell was paid $50,000 by a shell company tied to Briggs. She signed papers. Legal documents. Giving up custody of a child. Nathaniel's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. Custody to who? Marcus slid another paper across the desk. It was a birth certificate. Forged. With Walter Briggs listed as the legal guardian. He took her, Nathaniel whispered. He stole my daughter. And raised her in secret, Marcus added. Kept her hidden. Used her as leverage. Insurance. Insurance for what? Against you, Marcus said. If you ever went against your father. Against their empire. He had proof. A child. Your child. He could destroy you with it. Nathaniel stood up, his whole body shaking with rage. Where is he now? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed him a photo. Walter Briggs. Standing outside a country club. Smiling. Shaking hands. Living his life like he hadn't tried to murder a 7-year-old girl. Nathaniel stared at the photo. I'm going to destroy him, he said quietly. Marcus looked him in the eye. Good. Let me help. Nathaniel spent the next 2 days learning everything about Walter Briggs. His schedule. His habits. His weaknesses. The man was careful. Powerful. Connected. But he wasn't untouchable. Marcus dug deeper. Found more dirt. More secrets buried under years of lies. And the picture became clear. Walter Briggs hadn't just helped Nathaniel's father cover up the pregnancy. He'd planned the whole thing. When Grace refused to disappear quietly, Briggs stepped in. He threatened her. Told her if she didn't sign the papers, she'd never see her child again. That she'd go to jail for fraud. For trying to trap a rich man. Grace had no money. No lawyer. No way to fight back. So she signed. And Briggs took the baby. He raised her in secret. Kept her locked away in a house outside the city. No school. No friends. Just walls and silence. Why would he do that? Nathaniel asked Marcus. Why keep her alive? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Leverage, he said. Think about it. You're a billionaire now. You run your father's empire. If you ever stepped out of line, if you ever tried to expose the family's dirty secrets. Briggs had proof. A living, breathing secret that could destroy you. Nathaniel's stomach turned. So she was insurance. Exactly, Marcus said. But when she got older, started asking questions, became harder to control. She became a problem, Nathaniel finished, his voice cold. Marcus nodded. He couldn't let her talk. Couldn't risk her finding you. So he decided to get rid of her. Nathaniel stood up and walked to the window. The city light stretched out below him. Beautiful. Peaceful. But all he could see was red. He tried to kill a 7-year-old girl, Nathaniel said quietly. My daughter. Because she was inconvenient. He turned around, his eyes burning with rage. I want him destroyed. Not just arrested. Destroyed. I want his name dragged through the mud. I want everyone to know what he did. Marcus smiled. A dark smile. Then let's give them a show, he said. Nathaniel nodded. Find me everything. Bank records. Emails. Phone calls. Every dirty deal he's ever made. I don't care what it costs. Already on it, Marcus said. Nathaniel grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Where are you going? Marcus asked. To see my daughter, Nathaniel said. And to promise her that the man who hurt her will pay. When Nathaniel got back to the hospital, his daughter was awake. She was sitting up in bed, staring out the window. Her small hands were folded in her lap. Hey, sweetheart, Nathaniel said softly as he walked in. She turned and smiled. But it didn't reach her eyes. Hi, she said quietly. Nathaniel sat down beside her bed. How are you feeling today? She shrugged. Okay, I guess. But Nathaniel could see it. The sadness. The weight she was carrying. Do you want to talk? He asked gently. She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. I remember things, she said. Things from before. Nathaniel's chest tightened. What kind of things? She looked down at her hands. The house, she said. It was big. But empty. Cold. There were no pictures on the walls. No toys. Just, nothing. Her voice cracked. He never let me leave. Said the outside world was dangerous. That people would hurt me if they found me. Nathaniel's fists clenched. Did he hurt you? She nodded slowly. Sometimes, she whispered. When I asked too many questions. When I cried. He'd lock me in my room for days. No food. No water. Just darkness. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. I asked him once. I asked him why I didn't have a mom. Why I didn't have friends like other kids. What did he say? Nathaniel asked, his voice barely steady. He said I was a mistake, she said, her voice breaking. That nobody wanted me. That I should be grateful he didn't throw me away. Nathaniel's heart shattered. He reached out and gently took her hand. Listen to me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You are not a mistake. You hear me? You are not a mistake. She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. Then why did he hate me so much? Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. Held her tight. Because he's a monster, Nathaniel whispered. But I promise you, sweetheart. I promise you, he will never hurt you again. She buried her face in his chest and cried. And Nathaniel made a silent vow. Walter Briggs would pay for every tear. Every nightmare. Every moment of pain he'd caused this little girl. He would pay with everything he had. Nathaniel didn't waste another second. The next morning, he made calls. Lots of them. First, he called his head of security. Then his legal team. Then every contact he had in law enforcement. By noon, he had a war room set up in his penthouse suite. Maps. Documents. Photos of Walter Briggs plastered across the walls. Marcus was there. So was his lawyer, David Chen. And 2 detectives from the state police, men Nathaniel trusted. Men who owed him favors. All right, Nathaniel said, standing at the head of the table. Let's be clear about what we're doing here. Walter Briggs tried to murder my daughter. He's been hiding her for 7 years. Using her as blackmail. And now he wants her dead. He slammed his hand on the table. We're going to take him down. Legally. Publicly. I want the whole world to see what kind of monster he is. Detective Morris leaned forward. We've been looking into Briggs for years, he said. But he's smart. Covers his tracks. We've never had enough to make anything stick. That changes today, Nathaniel said. He nodded at Marcus. Marcus stood and pulled up files on the big screen. Bank transfers, Marcus said. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. Briggs has been laundering money for decades. We've got the paper trail. He clicked to the next slide. Forged documents. Including the guardianship papers for Nathaniel's daughter. We can prove they're fake. Another click. And phone records. Calls made to 2 hired men the night before the drowning. We've identified them. Both have criminal records. One of them is already talking. Detective Morris whistled. This is good. Really good. But we need more. We need him on tape. Confessing. Nathaniel smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. Then we'll get him on tape, he said. How? David asked. Nathaniel leaned forward, his eyes burning with determination. We set a trap, he said. We make him think he's won. That I'm scared. That I'm willing to pay him off to make this go away. Marcus grinned. A sting operation. Exactly, Nathaniel said. We wire me up. Record everything. And when he confesses. He looked around the room. We bury him. Detective Morris nodded slowly. It's risky. If he suspects anything. He won't, Nathaniel interrupted. Because he thinks I'm just another rich kid who's scared of scandal. He doesn't know I'm ready to burn everything down to protect my daughter. David stood up. Let's do it. They had 48 hours to set everything up. Marcus worked on the technical side. Wires. Hidden cameras. Backup recordings. The detectives worked on getting the warrant. Making sure everything was legal. Airtight. And Nathaniel. He prepared himself mentally. Because facing Walter Briggs meant facing the man who'd stolen his daughter. Who'd tried to kill her. It took everything in him not to just drive to Briggs' house and beat him to death with his bare hands. But he had to be smart. Patient. Justice had to be perfect. On the second night, Nathaniel went back to the hospital to check on his daughter. She was sleeping peacefully. Finally. The nightmares had been getting better. He sat beside her bed and watched her breathe. In and out. Safe. Alive. He was about to leave when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. Last warning. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. He texted back. Who is this? No response. He stood up and walked into the hallway, his hand gripping the phone tight. Another text came through. You think you can touch Briggs? You think you're untouchable because you're rich? Walk away. Or we'll finish what we started. Nathaniel's blood boiled. He started typing a response. But before he could send it, he heard something. A sound. Down the hall. Footsteps. Fast. Running. Nathaniel's head snapped up. A man in a black hoodie was at the nurse's station. He shoved the nurse aside and bolted toward the stairwell. Hey! Nathaniel shouted. He took off running. His legs pumping hard. His heart pounding. The man hit the stairwell door and disappeared. Nathaniel burst through seconds later. He could hear the man's footsteps echoing below. He jumped down the stairs 2 at a time. But by the time he reached the ground floor, the man was gone. Nathaniel stood in the empty lobby, breathing hard. His fists clenched. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus. They just tried to get to her, Nathaniel said, his voice shaking with rage. At the hospital. Someone was here. Are you serious? Marcus asked. We're out of time, Nathaniel said. Move the plan up. We do this tomorrow night. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You sure? I'm sure, Nathaniel said. Because if we wait any longer, they'll try again. And next time, I might not be here to stop them. The next morning, they moved fast. Nathaniel hired private security to guard his daughter's hospital room. 2 men. Armed. Standing outside her door 24/7. Nobody was getting to her again. Then he met with the team at his penthouse. Everyone was there. Faces serious. Ready. We do this tonight, Nathaniel said. No more waiting. Detective Morris nodded. We've got the warrant. The wire is ready. The backup team will be in position. Marcus pulled up a map on the screen. The meat is here, he said, pointing. Warehouse District. East Side. Abandoned building. No cameras. No witnesses. Perfect place for a confession, David added. Nathaniel stared at the map. His heart was pounding. How does this go down? He asked. Detective Morris stood up. You call Briggs. Tell him you know everything. That you have proof. But you're willing to make a deal. What kind of deal? Nathaniel asked. Money, Morris said. You offer him $5 million to disappear. To leave you and your daughter alone. Forever. Nathaniel nodded slowly. And he'll take the bait. He's greedy, Marcus said. And arrogant. He'll think he's won. That you're scared. That you're willing to pay him off to protect your reputation. David leaned forward. Once he shows up, you keep him talking. Get him to admit everything. What he did to Grace. How he took your daughter. Why he tried to kill her. And we'll be recording every word, Morris added. Once we have the confession, we move in. Arrest him on the spot. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. What if he doesn't confess? What if he suspects something? Morris looked him in the eye. Then you push him. Make him angry. Proud men like Briggs. They love to brag. They love to feel powerful. You give him that. Let him think he's smarter than you. Nathaniel nodded. I can do that. Marcus handed him a small device. A wire. Thin. Almost invisible. This goes under your shirt, Marcus said. Right here. Over your heart. Nathaniel took it. Felt the weight of it in his hand. This was it. Tonight, he'd face the man who destroyed his life. And he'd make him pay. Let's do this, Nathaniel said. At 6 p.m., Nathaniel made the call. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. But inside, he was burning. The phone rang twice before Walter Briggs picked up. Nathaniel Hayes, Briggs said, his voice smooth. Confident. I was wondering when you'd call. We need to talk, Nathaniel said coldly. Do we now? Briggs chuckled. About what? About the girl you tried to drown, Nathaniel said. About the lies. The forgeries. All of it. There was silence on the other end. Then Briggs laughed. A low, dark laugh. You've been busy, he said. Digging where you shouldn't be digging. I know everything, Nathaniel said. Grace. The custody papers. The threats. The men you hired. Careful, Son, Briggs said, his voice turning sharp. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm not playing, Nathaniel shot back. I'm offering you a way out. Another pause. I'm listening. Nathaniel took a breath. $5 million, he said. Cash. Untraceable. You take it and disappear. Leave the country. Leave me and my daughter alone. Forever. Briggs was quiet. Thinking. And if I refuse? Then I go to the press, Nathaniel said. I go to the FBI. I burn your entire world to the ground. More silence. Then Briggs laughed again. You think you can threaten me? You think your money scares me? I think you're smart enough to know when you've lost, Nathaniel said. Take the deal, Walter. Walk away while you still can. Briggs was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. His voice was cold. Calculated. All right, he said. Where and when? Nathaniel's heart pounded. Tonight. Midnight. Old warehouse on East River Road. Come alone. I could say the same to you, Briggs said. I will, Nathaniel lied. This stays between us. No lawyers. No cops. Just you and me. Briggs chuckled. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. Midnight, Nathaniel repeated. Don't be late. He hung up. Marcus looked at him from across the room. He's coming. Nathaniel nodded. He's coming. Detective Morris stood up and checked his gun. Then let's get ready, he said. Because tonight, we end this. The warehouse was dark. Cold. Empty. Perfect. Nathaniel stood in the center of the room, a single light bulb hanging above his head. The wire was taped to his chest. Hidden under his shirt. Recording everything. Outside, in unmarked vans, Detective Morris and his team waited. Watching. Listening. Marcus was with them. Monitoring the feed. You good? Marcus's voice crackled softly in Nathaniel's hidden earpiece. Nathaniel tapped his chest twice. The signal for yes. Now, all he had to do was wait. At 11:58 p.m., headlights cut through the darkness. A black SUV pulled up outside. The engine shut off. Nathaniel's heart pounded. His palms were sweating. But he kept his face calm. Cold. The door opened. Walter Briggs stepped out. He was tall. Gray hair slicked back. Expensive suit. A man who looked like power. Like control. But Nathaniel saw through it. He saw the monster underneath. Briggs walked into the warehouse slowly. His shoes echoing on the concrete floor. He stopped about 10 feet away from Nathaniel. Looked around. Smiled. Nice place, Briggs said. Very dramatic. You came alone? Nathaniel asked. Briggs shrugged. Did you? I gave you my word, Nathaniel said. Briggs laughed. Your word. That's cute. He stepped closer. So where's my money? Nathaniel didn't move. First, I need answers. Briggs raised an eyebrow. Answers? I thought this was a business deal. It is, Nathaniel said. But I need to know. Why? Why did you do it? Briggs tilted his head. Do what? Don't play games, Nathaniel said, his voice hard. Grace. My daughter. Why did you take her? Briggs stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. Because your father asked me to. Nathaniel's chest tightened. He asked you to steal my child. He asked me to clean up his son's mess, Briggs said casually. And I did. I made the problem go away. Paid the girl off. Took the baby. Raised her quietly. Out of sight. You locked her in a house, Nathaniel said through gritted teeth. You abused her. Starved her. Briggs shrugged again. She was fed. She had a roof over her head. She should have been grateful. Nathaniel's fists clenched. And when she got older? When she started asking questions? Briggs' smile faded. She became a liability, he said coldly. A loose end. I couldn't have her running around, looking for you. Ruining everything we'd built. So you tried to kill her, Nathaniel said. Briggs didn't deny it. He just stared at Nathaniel with cold, dead eyes. She was supposed to disappear quietly, Briggs said. But you had to play hero. Had to pull her out of that lake. She's my daughter, Nathaniel said, his voice shaking with rage. Briggs laughed. She's a mistake, he said. And mistakes need to be erased. That was it. That was the confession. Nathaniel heard Marcus's voice in his ear. We got it. We got everything. Moving in now. Briggs didn't hear them coming. He was too busy smiling. Too confident. Too proud. So where's my money? Briggs asked, spreading his arms. Or was this whole thing just a waste of my time? Nathaniel smiled back. But it wasn't friendly. It was cold. Deadly. You're not getting a dime, Nathaniel said. Briggs' smile dropped. Excuse me. You heard me, Nathaniel said. You're not walking out of here, Walter. You're going to prison. Briggs laughed. A harsh, mocking sound. Prison. You think you can touch me? I have connections. Lawyers. Judges in my pocket. You have nothing. I have everything, Nathaniel said. That's when the doors burst open. Detective Morris and 6 officers stormed in, guns drawn. Hands up. Now. Briggs spun around, his face going pale. What is this? He shouted. This is justice, Morris said. Walter Briggs, you're under arrest for kidnapping, child abuse, attempted murder, and conspiracy. You can't do this. Briggs yelled. I have rights. I have. You have the right to remain silent, Morris interrupted, stepping forward with handcuffs. And I suggest you use it. Briggs looked at Nathaniel, his eyes wild. Desperate. You set me up, he hissed. You set yourself up, Nathaniel said calmly. I just gave you the rope. You hung yourself. Morris grabbed Briggs' arm and yanked it behind his back. The handcuffs clicked into place. Wait. Briggs shouted. Wait. You don't understand. I was following orders. Nathaniel's father, he's the one who. Save it for your lawyer, Morris said, cutting him off. 2 officers grabbed Briggs and started dragging him toward the door. But Briggs kept shouting. Screaming. You think this changes anything? You think you've won? Your father is just as guilty. He's the one who paid me. He's the one who wanted her gone. Nathaniel stood perfectly still. Watching. Listening. And then he spoke. His voice low. Dangerous. I know, Nathaniel said. And he's next. Briggs' eyes went wide. Then the officers shoved him out the door. The warehouse went silent. Marcus walked in, grinning. We got it all, he said. Every word. It's over. Nathaniel nodded slowly. But his face was hard. Cold. No, he said quietly. It's just beginning. By morning, the story was everywhere. State senator arrested in child kidnapping case. Billionaire's hidden daughter nearly murdered. Political scandal rocks Texas. The news channels played the recordings on repeat. Briggs' voice. Cold. Arrogant. Confessing to everything. She was a liability, mistakes need to be erased. People were outraged. Disgusted. Walter Briggs, the man who'd shaken hands with governors, who'd smiled on campaign posters, who'd promised to protect families, had tried to murder a child. His career was over. His reputation destroyed. But Nathaniel didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. He sat in his lawyer's office, watching the news coverage on the TV mounted on the wall. David walked in with a folder. The DA's office just called, David said. They're moving forward with the case. With the recordings and the evidence we provided, they're confident they'll get a conviction. How long? Nathaniel asked. Trial starts in 6 weeks. But honestly, with what we have, he's going away for life. Nathaniel nodded. But his jaw was still tight. What about my father? David sat down slowly. That's more complicated. Briggs mentioned him in the recording. But it's hearsay. Not enough for charges. Not yet. Nathaniel's fists clenched. He knew. He paid Briggs to do this. To take my daughter. To hide her. I know, David said quietly. And we'll get him. But we need more evidence. Direct proof. Emails. Bank records. Something concrete. Nathaniel stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city moved on. People went to work. Lived their lives. But his life had stopped 8 years ago. And it was only now starting again. Find it, Nathaniel said, his voice cold. Whatever it takes. I want my father to answer for what he did. David nodded. I'm on it. Nathaniel stared out at the city. One monster was in chains. But the other was still out there. And Nathaniel wouldn't rest until he faced him too. 6 weeks later, the trial began. The courthouse was packed. Reporters lined the steps. Cameras flashed. Protesters held signs. Justice for children. Lock him up. Protect our kids. Inside, the courtroom was standing room only. Every seat filled. People squeezed against the walls just to watch. Nathaniel sat in the front row. His daughter beside him. She was nervous. Her small hand gripped his tight. It's okay, sweetheart, he whispered. You're safe. I promise. She nodded. But her eyes were fixed on the door. Waiting. Then he walked in. Walter Briggs. In an orange jumpsuit. Hands cuffed. Face pale. Hair messy. He looked smaller now. Weaker. Nothing like the confident man who'd stood in that warehouse. The crowd murmured. Some people booed. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Order in the court. Briggs sat down at the defense table. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something. But Briggs wasn't listening. His eyes scanned the room. And then they locked on Nathaniel. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Nathaniel's jaw was set. His eyes burning. Briggs looked away first. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution played the recordings. Every word. Every confession. She was a liability, mistakes need to be erased. The courtroom gasped. Some people covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disgust. Then they called witnesses. Grace Mitchell took the stand. Tears streaming down her face as she told her story. How Briggs had threatened her. Forced her to sign papers. Took her baby and told her she'd never see her again. I had no choice, Grace sobbed. I was alone. Scared. He said if I didn't sign, I'd lose everything. The jury listened. Silent. Horrified. Then Marcus testified. Showed the forged documents. The fake guardianship papers. The shell companies. The money trail. Everything pointed to Briggs. Finally, Nathaniel's daughter took the stand. The courtroom went completely silent. She was so small. So fragile. Sitting in that big chair. The prosecutor approached gently. Can you tell us what happened the night you were taken to the lake? She nodded. Her voice was quiet but steady. Two men came. They grabbed me. Tied my hands. Put tape on my mouth. She looked at Briggs. He told them to do it. I heard his voice on the phone. He said, make sure she doesn't come back. The jury's faces hardened. Briggs sat frozen. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering frantically. But it was too late. The defense had nothing. No witnesses. No evidence. Just excuses. On the third day, the jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they came back, the room held its breath. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of kidnapping, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of child abuse? Guilty. On the charge of attempted murder? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Cheers. Applause. Crying. Nathaniel pulled his daughter close. She buried her face in his chest. It's over, he whispered. He can't hurt you anymore. Briggs stood there. Pale. Shaking. The judge banged his gavel. Walter Briggs, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 2 officers grabbed Briggs and led him away. As he passed Nathaniel, he stopped. Looked at him one last time. Your father's next, Briggs said quietly. You know that, right? You're going after your own blood. Nathaniel stared him down. He stopped being my father the day he took my daughter from me. Briggs smiled sadly. Then they dragged him away. That night, Nathaniel brought his daughter home. Not to a hotel. Not to a hospital room. Home. To his estate. The place he'd built with his own hands. His own money. She stood in the doorway, eyes wide, looking at the grand staircase. The high ceilings. The paintings on the walls. This is where you live? She asked quietly. This is where we live, Nathaniel corrected. It's your home now too. She looked up at him. Her eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before. Hope. He showed her to her room. He'd spent the last week getting it ready. Pink walls. A big bed with soft blankets. Shelves full of books and toys. A window that looked out over the garden. Is this mine? She whispered. All yours, Nathaniel said, smiling. She walked in slowly. Touched the bed. The stuffed animals. The toy box in the corner. Then she turned around and hugged him tight. Thank you, Daddy, she said. Nathaniel's throat tightened. He knelt down and held her. You never have to thank me, he said. I should have been there from the beginning. I should have protected you. You didn't know, she said softly. That doesn't make it okay, Nathaniel replied, his voice breaking. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep, Nathaniel stood in her doorway. Watching her breathe. Watching her clutch the stuffed bear he'd bought her. She looked peaceful. Safe. But all Nathaniel could think about were the years he'd missed. Her first steps. Her first words. Birthdays. Christmases. All of it, gone. Stolen. He destroyed the man who took her. Sent him to prison for life. But the damage was already done. 7 years. Gone forever. She stirred in her sleep and whispered, "Daddy, don't go." The words hit him like a knife to the chest. He walked over and sat on the edge of her bed. Gently brushed the hair from her face. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. "Never again." But even as he said it, the guilt twisted inside him. He'd won the trial. He'd gotten justice. But he couldn't get back the time. And that haunted him more than anything. He sat there in the dark, watching over her. A father who'd come too late. 3 months later, Nathaniel took his daughter back to the lake. She'd asked to go. Said she wanted to see it again. To face it. Nathaniel wasn't sure it was a good idea. But he understood. Sometimes you have to go back to the place that broke you to prove it doesn't own you anymore. They stood at the edge of the water. The sun was rising. Golden light spreading across the surface. It was beautiful. Peaceful. Nothing like that terrible night. His daughter picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. It skipped once. Twice. Then sank. "I used to be scared of water," she said quietly. "But I'm not anymore." Nathaniel looked down at her. "Why not?" She smiled up at him. "Because you saved me," she said. "And now I know, no matter what happens, you'll always be there." Nathaniel's chest tightened. He knelt down beside her. "I will," he promised. "For the rest of my life. I'm going to make up for every day I missed. Every moment I should have been there." She reached out and touched his face. "You're here now," she said softly. "That's what matters." Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. Held her tight. The morning sun warmed their backs. Birds sang in the trees. The world felt new. But deep down, Nathaniel knew the truth. Some wounds never fully heal. Some betrayals cut too deep. He destroyed Walter Briggs. Sent him to rot in prison. But his father, the man who started it all, was still out there. Still free. And Nathaniel knew, eventually, he'd have to face him too. But not today. Today was for his daughter. For healing. For trying to build something good from the ashes of what was stolen. She laughed and threw another stone. It skipped 3 times. "Did you see that, Daddy?" "I saw it," Nathaniel said, smiling. And for the first time in 8 years, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. So what do you think? Could Nathaniel ever truly forgive himself? Could a father and daughter really heal from something this painful? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Top Story for more powerful stories. Remember, betrayal can break us. But love can rebuild us. Even when the damage feels permanent. 2 weeks after the trial, Nathaniel stood outside his father's mansion. The same house he grew up in. The same walls that held so many secrets. His father, Richard Hayes, didn't know he was coming. Nathaniel had the evidence now. Marcus had found it. Bank transfers. Emails. Recorded phone calls between his father and Briggs. Everything. His father had orchestrated the whole thing. Paid Briggs. Threatened Grace. Made his own grandchild disappear. And now, Nathaniel was going to make him answer for it. He walked up to the front door and knocked. A butler answered. "Mr. Nathaniel," the butler said, surprised. "Your father wasn't expecting." "I'm not here for a visit," Nathaniel interrupted, walking past him. "Where is he?" "In his study, sir, but..." Nathaniel didn't wait. He walked straight to the study and pushed the door open. Richard Hayes sat behind his massive oak desk. Reading glasses on. Papers spread in front of him. He looked up, startled. "Nathaniel," he said, removing his glasses. "What are you doing here?" Nathaniel closed the door behind him. Locked it. "We need to talk." Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "About what?" "About what you did," Nathaniel said, stepping closer. "About Grace. About my daughter. About the lies." Richard's face hardened. "I did what I had to do," he said coldly. "You were throwing your life away for some girl. I protected you." "Protected me?" Nathaniel's voice rose. "You stole my child. You paid Briggs to hide her. To abuse her." "I paid him to keep her out of sight," Richard corrected. "What he did after that was his business." Nathaniel slammed his fist on the desk. "She's 7 years old. She was starved. Beaten. Almost murdered. And you don't even care." Richard stood up slowly. "Watch your tone, boy. You're in my house." "Not for long," Nathaniel said. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the desk. "Hit play." His father's voice filled the room. "A recorded call with Briggs from 8 years ago. I don't care what it costs. Make the pregnancy disappear. Pay the girl off. Take the baby if you have to. I won't have my son's future destroyed by some nobody." Richard's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" "From Briggs' files," Nathaniel said. "The FBI seized everything when they arrested him. And guess what? Your name is all over it." Richard sat down slowly. For the first time, Nathaniel saw fear in his father's eyes. "What do you want?" Richard asked quietly. Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice ice cold. "I want you to confess. I want you to turn yourself in. And I want you to face what you've done." Richard laughed bitterly. "You think I'm going to prison? I have lawyers. Connections. This will never stick." "Maybe," Nathaniel said. "But I'm going to make sure the whole world knows what kind of man you are." He turned and walked toward the door. "Wait," Richard called out. Nathaniel stopped. "Didn't turn around. You'd really destroy your own father?" Richard asked. Nathaniel looked back over his shoulder. "You stopped being my father the day you took my daughter from me." Then he walked out. 3 days later, the news broke. Billionaire Richard Hayes implicated in kidnapping scandal. Father and son at war, the Hayes empire crumbles. Evidence links business tycoon to child abduction cover-up. Nathaniel had released everything to the press. The recordings. The bank statements. The emails. Every dirty secret his father had buried for decades was now public. The FBI opened an investigation. Richard Hayes was brought in for questioning. His lawyers fought hard. Called it hearsay. Accused Nathaniel of fabricating evidence out of revenge. But the paper trail was too strong. The recordings too clear. 2 weeks later, Richard Hayes was arrested. Nathaniel didn't go to his father's arraignment. He stayed home with his daughter. They were in the garden, planting flowers together. She looked up at him, dirt on her hands, smile on her face. "Daddy, look. This one's blooming already." Nathaniel smiled. "That's because you're taking good care of it." She beamed with pride. Then her expression changed. Became more serious. "Daddy, the man on TV. The one they arrested. That's your father, isn't it?" Nathaniel's smile faded. He nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart. That's him." "Are you sad?" she asked. Nathaniel thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," he said finally. "I'm not sad. I'm free." She didn't fully understand. But she hugged him anyway. Richard Hayes was convicted 6 months later. Conspiracy. Obstruction of justice. Child endangerment. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The Hayes family name, once powerful, respected, feared, was destroyed. The empire Richard had built crumbled. Business partners pulled out. Investors fled. The company stocks crashed. But Nathaniel didn't care. He'd already started over. Built something new. Something clean. A foundation for children who'd been abandoned. Abused. Forgotten. Named after his daughter. 1 year after everything began, Nathaniel and his daughter returned to the lake one more time. The place where it all started. She was bigger now. Stronger. Her smile came easier. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been here that night?" she asked. Nathaniel looked out at the water. At the place where he'd almost lost her. "Every day," he said quietly. She took his hand. "But you were here," she said. "And that's what matters." Nathaniel squeezed her hand gently. She was right. He couldn't change the past. Couldn't get back the years that were stolen. But he could be here now. Every day. For the rest of her life. And that was enough. And that's the end of Nathaniel's story. A story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us the most. But sometimes, just sometimes, we get a chance to make things right. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Top Story because we've got more powerful stories coming your way. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Nathaniel did the right thing by turning in his own father? Or should he have let it go? I want to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay blessed. And remember, it's never too late to fight for the people you love.